Have you always wondered which states would be targeted first if World War III breaks out? Some of these states will surprise you, and you would never expect them to be on the list of primary objectives. These are the top 10 U.S. states that will be destroyed first in World War III. If a global war ever erupts on U.S. soil, California won't just be targeted, it'll be obliterated in the opening minutes. As America's most populous state and one of its most strategically critical, California is packed with the kind of military, technological, and cultural assets that foreign adversaries dream of taking out first. Start with the military infrastructure. California is home to Naval Base San Diego, the Marine Corps' Camp Pendleton, and Vandenberg Space Force Base, not to mention Edwards Air Force Base, a testing ground for advanced aircraft. It also hosts dozens of smaller but vital facilities along the coast. That concentration of defense power makes California a top-tier military target. If World War III kicks off with missiles, cyber attacks, or drone swarms, there's little doubt California's bases will be among the first hit. But it doesn't stop with the military. California is also the tech and communications nerve center of the world. Silicon Valley houses the headquarters of Google, Apple, Meta, and countless defense contractors and infrastructure companies. Disabling this region would effectively blind much of the Western world's intelligence and communication systems, giving enemy nations a devastating advantage. A cyber attack, EMP strike, or tactical bombing of data centers could send shockwaves through every sector, from finance to defense. There's also economic and symbolic value. With ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach, California handles a massive chunk of the U.S. import-export market. Knocking out this supply chain would cripple the economy almost instantly. And from Hollywood to the Golden Gate Bridge, California is a global symbol of American culture. An attack here wouldn't just cause material damage, it would shatter morale worldwide. Lastly, California's population centers make it one of the most vulnerable states in terms of casualties. Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, all tightly packed urban cores that would face chaos if struck. Evacuation would be nearly impossible. Infrastructure like power grids, water supplies, and emergency services are not built for full-scale war. For any enemy launching a first strike, California offers the perfect mix of strategic value, symbolic impact, and sheer vulnerability. That's why, when World War III begins, California will be the first American state to face the fire. If there's one state that absolutely cannot avoid the first wave of a major global conflict, it's Virginia. Virginia holds a unique and critical position in the United States, making it a prime target if World War III ever breaks out. Located at the crossroads of the nation's political, military, and technological power centers, Virginia's strategic importance cannot be overstated. It is home to the Pentagon, the nerve center of the U.S. Department of Defense, and countless military bases, intelligence agencies, and defense contractors. This concentration of military command and control means that Virginia would almost certainly be one of the first places targeted in a large-scale conflict designed to cripple America's defense capabilities. Start with Hampton Roads, which includes Norfolk, Newport News, and Virginia Beach. This region is the largest concentration of military power on Earth. The Naval Station Norfolk alone houses the U.S. Navy's Atlantic Fleet, with dozens of ships, submarines, and aircraft ready for deployment. But in a World War scenario, this kind of firepower doesn't offer protection. It paints a target. In the event of a nuclear or hypersonic strike, this base is guaranteed to be among the first hit. Then there's the Pentagon, which is located just outside Washington, D.C. in Arlington, Virginia. As the central command hub of the U.S. Department of Defense, an attack here wouldn't just damage infrastructure, it would strike at the very core of U.S. military leadership and planning. Beyond the Pentagon, the region includes several other key installations that house thousands of active duty personnel and high-value assets. Quantico, home to the FBI Academy and Marine Corps Base, is a high-level military site. Langley Air Force Base, home to stealth aircraft and intelligence operations, is deeply integrated into U.S. global defense. Add in CIA facilities in Northern Virginia, and suddenly you're looking at a state that's not just important, it's irreplaceable. Disrupting these sites could paralyze military coordination and readiness on a massive scale. Virginia's role extends beyond just the military. The state hosts a large number of technology companies and data centers, particularly in Northern Virginia's Data Center Alley around Ashburn. This area supports a significant portion of the Internet's infrastructure, including cloud computing services for government agencies and private enterprises. A coordinated cyber attack or physical strike on these data centers could cause widespread communication blackouts, crippling everything from government operations to financial markets. Furthermore, Virginia's proximity to Washington, D.C. means it is also a key political hub. Many government offices, including parts of the CIA and NSA, operate within the state's borders. The cascading effects of a strike here could include not only military and technological chaos, but also political instability at the highest levels. All these factors combined place Virginia at the center of national defense, intelligence, and infrastructure. Because of this, it stands out as one of the most likely states to be hit first and hardest in World War III, suffering potentially catastrophic damage, both physically and psychologically. The state's importance makes it a critical battleground that could shape the outcome of any major global conflict. At first glance, Washington State looks like the last place you'd expect to be on the front lines of World War III. With its scenic mountains, booming tech hubs, and liberal reputation, it seems more like a peaceful retreat than a military hotspot. But don't let the trees and tech fool you. Washington is one of the most strategically exposed states in the entire country, and in a global war, that makes it dangerous. Start with Naval Base Kitsap, one of the largest naval installations in the world and home to part of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. It houses Trident submarines loaded with nuclear missiles, which would play a central role in any American response to a nuclear threat. But if those subs are a deterrent, they're also a magnet. In a preemptive strike scenario, Kitsap would be at the top of any enemy's target list, especially for countries like China or Russia. Just across the water is Joint Base Lewis McChord, a massive Army and Air Force complex that's crucial for troop mobilization and airlift operations in the Pacific Theater. It's also within range of hypersonic missiles launched from the other side of the ocean, making it extremely vulnerable in a fast-moving conflict. And don't forget Seattle. Not just a tech capital, it's also a major port and home to aerospace giant Boeing, which produces vital military aircraft. In a full-scale war, the city could easily become a high-value industrial target. Plus, Washington's proximity to the Pacific Rim means it's one of the first states exposed if any conflict with China escalates. So while Washington might feel like a remote paradise in peacetime, it's right on the edge of the blast zone if World War III ever begins. If there's one state that represents the heart of the United States on the global stage, it's New York. And in the event of World War III, that recognition alone makes it one of the most vulnerable targets in the country, not just because of its population size or economic power, but because of what it represents to the rest of the world. New York City is the financial capital of the U.S. and arguably the entire Western world. Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange, and major institutions like J.P. Morgan Chase and Citigroup all call Manhattan home. That makes it a high-value bullseye for any adversary looking to disrupt U.S. economic systems. A successful strike here, whether physical or cyber, could send shockwaves across global markets instantly. But it's not just about money. New York also houses the United Nations headquarters, making it an international political hub. In the context of global warfare, A symbolic attack on the UN building or surrounding diplomatic districts would carry immense psychological weight and draw attention from every country on Earth. Then there's the population density. Over 8 million people live in New York City alone, packed into just 300 square miles. A large-scale attack here, whether conventional, biological, or cyber-induced panic, would create total chaos. Evacuation routes are limited, public transit is vulnerable, and emergency services would be overwhelmed within minutes. Infrastructure like bridges, tunnels, and airports would become choke points, not escape routes. In the eyes of an enemy, striking New York isn't just about physical destruction. It's about sending a psychological message. If a nuclear device were detonated over Manhattan, the human cost and global shock would be unmatched. And don't forget New York's vulnerability to cyber attacks and EMPs. In a tech-driven war paralyzing New York's power grid, transit systems, or financial networks would be a massive blow to national morale and an easy way to sow internal panic. But it's not just about New York City. The entire state plays a critical role in America's infrastructure. Fort Drum, located in upstate New York, is home to the 10th Mountain Division, one of the most deployed combat units in the U.S. Army. West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, also sits along the Hudson River. If major troop deployments are needed, New York becomes a critical corridor and a major liability. The state is also interwoven with the Northeast Corridor, the country's most economically vital region. A strike here would cripple power grids, communication lines, financial systems, and transportation routes that millions depend on across multiple states. New York has always been a symbol of resilience, from September 11th to Hurricane Sandy. But in World War III, that symbolism could make it one of the first and most devastating targets in the country. New York isn't just the most iconic city in America. It's the symbol of Western power, finance, and influence. And in World War III, symbols are targets. If a global war breaks out, New York could be one of the first places hit, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Texas is more than just big. It's one of the most strategically vital states in America, and that makes it an instant target in World War III. With its massive military footprint, sprawling oil infrastructure, and booming high-tech industries, Texas would be a priority strike zone for any global adversary looking to take down U.S. capabilities quickly. Let's start with the military. Texas hosts more military installations than any other state, including Fort Cavazos, one of the largest active-duty armored military bases in the world. There's also Joint Base San Antonio, Dyess Air Force Base, and Lackland Air Force Base, home to critical training and intelligence operations. These bases are essential for rapid deployment, surveillance, and air power. And in a global war, knocking them offline would be a top objective. But it doesn't stop there. Texas is the energy capital of the United States, producing more oil, natural gas, and wind power than any other state. Houston alone is home to over 5,000 energy companies, many of which are tied directly to national security and global supply chains. Disabling Texas's energy infrastructure would cause shockwaves not just across the U.S., but around the world. Add in major tech hubs like Austin, which is becoming a central node for semiconductor and AI development, and you've got a state that's loaded with high-value targets. And because Texas borders Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico, it's also geographically exposed. That makes it vulnerable to naval or missile strikes launched from international waters or even covert operations across its southern border. The state's sheer size and economic power make it harder to defend as a whole. You can't wall off Texas, and you can't quickly move millions of people out of cities like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, or El Paso if the unthinkable happens. In World War III, Texas would be both a shield and a sword for America. And any enemy would know that the faster they break it, the harder it becomes for the U.S. to fight back. Florida may be known for its beaches, retirees, and Disney World. But in the event of World War III, it instantly becomes one of the most dangerous places to live in the entire country. That's because Florida isn't just a sunny vacation state. It's a strategic military launch pad, a vulnerable peninsula, and a key point of access to both the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. First, the geography. Florida juts out into open waters, making it highly exposed to naval and missile attacks. Its nearly 1,200 miles of coastline create a security nightmare. There's simply too much land to protect and too many ways for adversaries to strike. If hostile submarines or warships get close, Florida could be one of the first places hit. Then there's the military infrastructure. Florida is packed with critical bases like MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, which houses U.S. Central Command and U.S. Special Operations Command, two of the most important military organizations in the country. There's also Eglin Air Force Base, one of the largest Air Force installations in the world, along with Naval Air Station Pensacola and Patrick Space Force Base. These aren't just military outposts, they're command centers, training hubs, and launch points. If a global war erupts, taking them out would be a priority for America's enemies. Florida's space assets add even more risk. Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center are not just about civilian space exploration, they're also tied to defense and satellite operations. In a war where communication, surveillance, and missile tracking rely on space, Florida becomes a massive target. And we haven't even touched on the population density. Cities like Miami, Tampa, and Orlando are packed. An evacuation would be nearly impossible in a short window. Add in the fact that Florida's aging infrastructure is already strained from hurricanes and climate threats, and you've got a recipe for chaos if missiles start flying. In World War III, Florida wouldn't just be on the map, it'd be in the crosshairs. At first glance, Colorado seems like one of the safest places in America. It's landlocked, far from any coastline, and surrounded by mountains. But don't let the scenery fool you. Colorado is actually one of the most strategically critical states in the entire country. And in World War III, that makes it a top-tier target. Why? One word: command. Colorado is home to Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station, a heavily fortified facility buried beneath 2,000 feet of granite. It was built during the Cold War to withstand a direct nuclear strike, and now houses parts of NORAD and U.S. Northern Command. This is where the military tracks incoming missiles, space threats, and foreign aircraft. In the event of World War III, any nation looking to blind or paralyze America's defense systems would aim straight for Colorado. But that's not all. Just down the road is Peterson Space Force Base, which handles global missile warning systems, satellite control, and key operations for space warfare. Then there's Schriever Space Force Base, home to critical satellite command units, GPS operations, and classified cybersecurity programs. Taken together, these facilities make Colorado the brainstem of America's space and missile defense architecture. Even Denver International Airport, already infamous for its size, bunkers, and conspiracy theories, doubles as a potential command and logistics hub in wartime scenarios. Its strategic layout and underground infrastructure have long fueled rumors of military preparations beneath the surface. And while that's speculative, its strategic value isn't. Ironically, the very things that make Colorado look safe, mountains, isolation, open land, are exactly what make it the perfect place to hide the most vital elements of U.S. defense. But that also means if a global war breaks out, it's not just the coasts that are in danger. Colorado would be one of the first places targeted, not for destruction, but for disruption. Take out Colorado's defense brain, and the rest of the country starts to go blind. In World War III, Colorado's safety is just an illusion. To most people, Hawaii is a tropical dream, a paradise of beaches, volcanoes, and aloha spirit. But in the eyes of global adversaries, it's something far more dangerous. a floating fortress in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And if World War III breaks out, Hawaii could be one of the first U.S. states to be attacked, and one of the hardest to defend. At the center of this risk is Pearl Harbor, home to the U.S. Pacific Fleet. It's not just a historical landmark, it's America's largest naval command in the Pacific, controlling aircraft carriers, submarines, destroyers, and logistics critical to operations across Asia. If China, Russia, or North Korea were to launch a first strike in the Pacific theater, Pearl Harbor would be the bullseye again. Just like in 1941, crippling the U.S. fleet early would be a top priority. But Pearl Harbor isn't the only vulnerability. Hickam Air Force Base, which shares runways with Honolulu International Airport, is a key hub for U.S. air operations over the Pacific. It supports refueling, long-range bomber deployment, and rapid response missions. Knocking out Hickam would paralyze American air power in the region. The worst part? Hawaii's geographic isolation, which normally protects it, becomes a nightmare during wartime. Resupplying and reinforcing the islands is extremely difficult under missile threat. In a sustained conflict, civilian populations could be cut off from mainland support, leaving over 1 million people stranded, with limited infrastructure and high dependency on imports. And while its tropical landscape seems idyllic, Hawaii is dotted with military installations, from missile defense radar systems on Kauai to surveillance and communications hubs across Oahu. That means multiple potential targets spread across the islands, increasing the risk to civilians caught in the crossfire. In World War III, Hawaii would go from paradise to war zone within hours. And unlike the mainland, there's no easy escape. It's not just a vacation destination, it's the front line in a war America hopes never comes. When most people think of Alaska, they imagine vast wilderness, remote villages, and snow-covered mountains. But in the context of World War III, Alaska suddenly becomes one of the most vulnerable and strategically important states in the entire U.S. Its location is both its greatest strength and its most dangerous liability. Alaska is the closest U.S. state to both Russia and China, with only the Bering Strait separating it from Russian territory by roughly 55 miles. That proximity means if tensions escalate, Alaska would be one of the first places exposed to long-range bombers, missiles, or even hypersonic weapons launched from across the Arctic Circle. And because of the geography, those attacks could come with little to no warning. The state is home to a surprising amount of military infrastructure. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson near Anchorage is a key installation for U.S. air defense, with F-22 fighter jets and radar systems meant to track threats approaching from the west. Alaska also plays a vital role in America's missile shield. Fort Greely, near Fairbanks, is one of the few sites that can intercept intercontinental ballistic missiles before they reach the mainland. That makes it a high-value target in the event of a nuclear or conventional first strike, especially from powers like Russia or China. If enemy missiles were launched, Alaska might not just be the first to detect them, it might also be the first to burn. Further north, Eielson Air Force Base and Fort Wainwright make Alaska one of the most militarized regions in the country per capita. While this gives the U.S. a frontline defense, it also paints a giant target on the state. And if those bases are targeted in a first strike scenario, Alaska's civilian population could suffer massive collateral damage, especially in Anchorage and Fairbanks. Evacuating remote communities would be nearly impossible, especially during the brutal winters. The state's infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports, is not designed for wartime mass movement, which means any attack could quickly isolate entire regions. Another overlooked risk? The Trans-Alaska Pipeline. This 800-mile oil pipeline transports millions of barrels of crude oil from Prudhoe Bay to the port of Valdez. It's a critical piece of the U.S. energy supply, and its destruction could trigger a national fuel crisis. A well-placed strike or cyber attack on the pipeline could take it offline for months, crippling not just Alaska, but the entire western U.S. What makes things worse is the state's strategic importance in Arctic warfare. As the ice melts and new sea routes open, nations are jockeying for control over the region's resources and shipping lanes. That puts Alaska squarely in the middle of a rising geopolitical flashpoint, where military escalation could happen fast and without warning. In a conventional war, Alaska might seem remote. But in the era of long-range precision strikes, cyber warfare, and global surveillance, Alaska becomes a bullseye, quiet, vast, and terrifyingly exposed. If World War III erupts, this icy frontier could be the very first U.S. soil to see flames. At first glance, Illinois seems far from any battlefield. It's in the middle of the country, with no international borders or major naval bases. But in a global conflict like World War III, Illinois transforms from a quiet flyover state into a critical and vulnerable cog in America's war machine, making it a prime target. First, there's Chicago, the third largest city in the U.S. and one of the nation's most important economic and transportation hubs. It's home to O'Hare International Airport, a major cargo and logistics center, and one of the busiest rail and trucking corridors in the country. That means if the U.S. military needs to move weapons troops or supplies quickly across the nation, it likely flows through Illinois. Disrupting this bottleneck would cripple the nation's logistics. Even more dangerous is Illinois' role in America's power grid. The state operates more nuclear power reactors than any other in the country, 11 in total, spread across 6 nuclear power plants. In a high-level war scenario, these plants become high-value targets, either for sabotage or long-range missile strikes. A single catastrophic incident could lead to radiation fallout across multiple states, triggering mass evacuations, panic, and chaos, without a single missile landing on a coastal city. Illinois also sits on key communication infrastructure. The state hosts major fiber optic cables, internet switching centers, and data centers that power everything from banking to government operations. A cyber or EMP attack centered on Illinois could paralyze digital systems nationwide. While the state doesn't have the sheer number of military bases seen in coastal regions, it does have strategic facilities like Scott Air Force Base, which plays a central role in coordinating U.S. military transport and global communications. If that goes down, America's ability to move forces around the world could grind to a halt. So while Illinois may not see the first wave of missiles or troops, it could be among the first states to break under the pressure of a modern hybrid war, where infrastructure, supply chains, and chaos are just as deadly as bombs. In World War III, the fall of Illinois could mean the fall of America's backbone. Click the video on the screen for more.